All right, folks. Real quick, we're going to have a presentation here from Mark about presentations. So if you could all give him a big hand. Go ahead and get started.
Thanks. So by now, I'm sure that you all are experiencing a range of human emotions: anxious, nervous, stressed out, excitedly anxious. But don't worry, you've got people like me that are here to help I got a bunch of rules. If you follow them, I partially guarantee success. So here's the first rule I want you to follow. You're here to learn. Now, you might be thinking, well, obviously, this is a classroom. Why do you even need to say this? But I found making this a mantra really helped me through some hard times, because in a couple days, you're going to be looking like this. I'd spend about 10% of each project with my face on the floor. And just keeping that in mind helped me, keep balance of it. One of your likely culprits is going to be GitHub. So if you're like me, you will have a time where you're saying, God, I just spent the last 2 hours trying to get my versions under control. I haven't been making any progress. I'm a waste of time. But no, it's not, because you're learning GitHub. You may be struggling with it, but learning GitHub is one of the most important things you can get out of this project. So just be ready for that, and your teachers are here to help you. Another thing you need to be learning is teamwork. So I want to challenge everybody. You probably by now know your strengths. You may think of yourself as more comfortable with the front end, or maybe you're more comfortable with JavaScript. And you might be inclined to take on that role in your team. But I encourage everybody to be a part of the whole project, because that's how you learn, by challenging yourself. And I want everybody to be patient with their teammates as they learn. Specifically, I really recommend spending some time doing pair programming. And what that would look like is one person types, and their partner who is working with them is giving them the directions. And that keeps both people involved and both people kind of working together, thinking things out together. I think it's a really great way to go. All right, got another one. And this one's another mantra, again, for the tough times. It's remember that the only thing you can control, put your work in. And so this means really the only way to fail this project is to not put your work in, to not put your whole self into it. As long as you're working, you're learning. And there's rule number 1 as well. But we probably want to get past all these vague inspirational quotes and get more to business. How do we avoid complete disaster, right? Because what you're probably really afraid of is you get up to your presentation and you're demoing your project and nothing works, it doesn't work, it doesn't load, it doesn't do any of the things you expect it to do, right? That's a pretty scary thing. First, I want to assure you, you won't be the only ones. It happened in all of my projects. There's at least one group who their project just wasn't really working. But of course, we want to avoid that. So the best way to avoid disaster is turn to our MVP. That's a minimum viable product. So what this means is when you're thinking about your project, especially in this early part where you're planning things out, you want to think about what is the simplest, kind of most basic working thing that we want to get together. Because you want to start with something small that works and then build out from there. So as you're planning your project, try to start thinking small. Like, it's okay to have big ambitions, but think about like what's a good first step. Maybe since you need to use APIs, maybe just think, how can I get information from that API to display before you worry about any other fancy technology. You want to start with something simple, and then over time you can build onto it. And as something you might find out, you may have big ideas, and again, that's great. You want to do something that inspires you and motivates you, but you may run into you can't get the thing to work that you wanted to. You may not get the API you wanted to work with your front end. You know, you may need a key that you're going to have to wait 2 weeks to get. Well, that's not going to help you out. So be ready if you need to change your plan, change ideas. You have time to do it. Don't be afraid to make drastic changes because some amazing things can really come out of that and out of that pressure. So that's the basic project. But now we'll get into some specifics about the presentation part itself. And it's important because, you know, that's what everybody else is going to see. They're not really going to see the inside of your project. So I'm going to help you avoid things like this. And what do I have to help? More rules. All right. With your presentation, you need to respect your audience. And that means, you know, respect their time. The class is structured. Eric is very smart, and he gives us a time limit and holds us to a time limit. And if we run into a bad presentation, you're going to be really glad for that time limit. But thinking in the bigger picture, you know, you want to keep your ideas succinct. And really, most importantly, out of respecting your audience, is to put the work in on the front end. If your presentation is an afterthought part of your project, it's going to seem like an afterthought. You know, it makes a big difference if the team has clearly practiced their presentation, has gone through and talked to each other about it. So I just encourage you all to start thinking a couple days ahead of, you know, what are you going to present? What is that going to look like? My next rule, respect the art form. So I truly believe that a PowerPoint presentation is a form of art. And that's why I use Canvas as the background here. And, you know, as any art form, it's got some rules and some guidelines to it, and I can give you some help for it. So one thing about PowerPoints is an ineffective way to use it is to simply read your slides. Your slides are helpful. They can be like your notes. They can help you keep structure of your presentation. But if you do nothing but just read directly from the slides, it's going to have an effect like this. People are going to lose interest because they're already 3 steps ahead of you. The relationship you want to have with your slideshow is going to be more like the Sklar brothers. You want to be talking over each other, finishing each other's jokes, setting each other up. And of course, a lot of use of GIFs and memes and that kind of stuff is always welcome. Next part of your presentation, when you get talking about the project specifically.
What? Don't do that.
That's okay. So you want to think about your project as having a story, and you want to tell the story. The example I think of is, okay, well, what you don't want to do is just start talking about it. Well, I started by setting up these functions, and I needed to declare my variables and ... That's not really going to grab people's attention. You've got to think you may be presenting in the future to people without a lot of technical knowledge, but everybody can relate to a story, a powerful story here, so you want to start with that. What inspired you about your project? What kind of problems or ideas caused you to choose what you chose to do? I'd also like to think about it as, you know, during the Olympics where they'll give a backstory of an athlete to help you really connect to that athlete. They tell you about how, you know, they lost one of their parents at a young age and that drove them on, and that really gets you psyched up about their performance. Well, I want to hear about your project's dead mother, because that's really what's going to inspire people as we move on. I mean, that's really what's going to get people connected to it. And then once you show the tragedy and the hardship they faced, you can show, you know, how well you overcame these difficulties, and it makes you look good, right? Now the demo part specifically, that's going to be part of your presentation where you go through the project. And I just want to encourage you to have a very specific plan of what you're going to do in your demo. Step by step, plan with your team. You know, we're going to do a sample login. What kind of actions are we going to do? And that way you can test it over and over. Again, to avoid the great disasters. So having a road plan and going over it again and again. That's the best way to avoid that whole thing of your program breaking in front of the whole classroom. All right. Promise there's only one last rule. And it's about, you know, having a presence when you're up on stage. But actually, this is wrong. You don't need to be yourself. You can be a character. I mean, do you think I'm being me up here right now? No, this is a character that I've created. It gives me psychological distance, and that way I can confidently talk in front of a room full of people. So I encourage you all to do the same. I hope it's been helpful, and I just want to send positivity towards you and look to all of us for help if you need it.